discussed about component life cycle. I first explained the basic architecture, means how React application works, a basic flow I given. That means clients makes a request. What are the key points? Yesterday we discussed this. So from client side, a request will go. This request will go to web server. In web server, we will have a HTTP processing pipeline. Here, it will process the request by using HTTP handler. HTTP handler will make use of a routing engine, and this routing engine will take help of route table. In the route table, it will contain all the collection of paths, and if requested path is available, if it is available, then what it will do is it will render into index.html. That's what it is going to do. This is the basic process, how it is going to work. Yesterday I showed you the flow. So that is first thing. After that, another important point is, this is one architecture. Another point is, you need to understand how a library works in browser. Because what is React? React is a framework or library? Library. What is difference between library and framework? React is a library and Angular is a framework. So what is difference between library and framework? I think I discussed this in the beginning. So a library can build application, but it cannot control application flow. You can build application, but it cannot control application flow. So it depends on events. We need events to control the application flow. Framework can build the application and can control the application flow. It can do both things. Actually, how a library works, how a library is going to work. So how the library works is, this is the summary, and this summary defines the outline flow. How the request happens to React application and how React application responds. Actually, how a library like React works in browser. Usually what happens is, that diagram I will give. Actually, so we have the client. So this is generally the browser. So we have browser. This is a browser. Browser is any browser that you are using. What happens is, whenever you make a request, suppose this is the client, and the client makes a request. So client makes a request. This is the request. That is the request. When client makes request, what happens is yesterday, what a flow I showed, that all will work. That means web server, it will identify whether the component is present or not. If component is present, then it should load. Actually, first, what will happen is generally in the browser, first step is it loads static DOM. It loads the static DOM. That is document object model. It loads the static DOM first. Means in browser, the static DOM is loaded. Actually, this static DOM is loaded on an event called DOM content loaded event. There will be an event called DOM content loaded. On this event, what browser will do? Browser will load the static DOM. Static DOM means all elements are loaded. Means button, text box, images, all elements are loaded. That is static DOM. And on which method it will load? It will load on a method called DOM content loaded. On DOM content loaded, it will load the static DOM. Browser uses an event called DOM content loaded. We can see that actually. Suppose let's open our project. Here, let's run our project. So here, let's run the project. This is npm start. When we start, by default, index page will load in browser. In that index page, the component will load. So you can observe the basic hierarchy actually. Let it open, we can see that. Okay, so this is the page loaded. And see now, I will right click, go to inspect. In the inspect, let's go to network category here. Network category. Okay. In this network category, let's request the page. This is network category. I'm refreshing the page. And you can see it actually have an event called DOM content loaded. This is the event. So whenever you request any HTML page, whether it may be React, Angular, or general web application, every HTML page loads its all elements into browser on an event called DOM content load. There will be an event DOM content lead. On this event, it is loading all the elements on the screen. That is the first event that fires up. Whenever you any HTML, that event name is DOM content load. What this event will do, it will load all the content in the browser. Page content is loaded into browser. That is the first step. After that, what will happen? After DOM content is loaded, actually, it is a lengthy process. I will let's keep the process lengthy here. Yeah. After DOM content is loaded, next step, what happens is the library, which page DOM content is loaded. So that initial DOM content is loaded. After DOM content is loaded, so next step, it loads library into browser. It loads the library into browser. So after DOM content loaded, the library is loaded into browser. And I hope you know what is the library used for React. Whatever the library is required for React, that library is loaded. Can you name the library which is loaded? Which library is loaded for React? Initially, what are that for React? What is the library that you link for a React application? So you need, one is React library, React DOM library, and Babel. Am I right? These are the basic libraries. That means first the static DOM will load. After loading the static DOM, it loads right now. Means first when page is loaded, it is static. It will not respond. Button is there, but it is not working. Text box is there, it is not working. Just design. After that, library loads into browser. Now, can you tell on which, how this library is loaded? Actually, how this library is loaded in browser. Generally, if you link those library files, browser will recognize and load them. Otherwise, if the application is using Webpack or parcel like concepts, from that Webpack, it will identify what is the library required and it will load that library. So Webpack, you will see only first basic library required for React is 3. React, React DOM, and Babel. Can you tell the purpose of them? What is the role of React? That is the core library of React, which provides all React hooks, React methods. React hooks, React methods, all are present in which library? React. What is React DOM library? It is used to manipulate virtual DOM, adding elements into DOM, removing elements from DOM, showing, hiding elements, virtual events, all are managed by React DOM. Babel is a compiler, right? You need, you know, these three are the basic. Okay. After that, what happens? After loading the library, now next step, what happens is, what is the entry point? What is the entry point for the React application? From where it will start after loading the library? From where it will start? It will start from a page. Actually, after loading the basic library, so it loads. So it loads all dependencies defined in all dependencies that are defined in index.js. It loads all the dependencies defined in index.js. That is the next thing it does. That means it will load first the core library. What is the core library? Core library is React, React DOM, and BAB. It will load in that index.js, all dependencies are there. It will load them. What are the dependencies? Axios, or you are using some Formic. Later you will see Formic and all. Third parties, Bootstrap libraries, Bootstrap CSS, Bootstrap JavaScript. All the other dependencies that are being used in your project, they are loaded. That means load the DOM first, load the basic library, and load all the dependencies. Once all the dependencies are loaded, now what happens is, after loading all the dependencies, next step, what will happen is, in the next step, virtual DOM is created. Virtual DOM is rendered. That means what it will do is, so it renders virtual DOM. It renders virtual DOM because React is not directly going to manage the DOM. It is going to manage which one? Virtual DOM. After all the dependencies are loaded, and it renders the virtual DOM. So that is the reason you may get errors if any dependency is not correctly defined. Virtual DOM is not rendered until or unless all the dependencies are perfectly loaded. After loading all the dependencies, now it will render the virtual DOM. Virtual DOM is the DOM which have interaction with user. User interacts with which one? Virtual DOM. So this virtual DOM is actually, this virtual DOM is called dynamic DOM. So it is referred as dynamic DOM. What is the difference between static DOM and dynamic DOM? Static DOM, this is dynamic DOM. So what is the difference between static and dynamic DOM? So this is dynamic DOM. Okay. The difference between static and dynamic DOM is, static DOM will have just content, but there are no interactions. But dynamic DOM, it starts interactions. That's the static DOM is converted into dynamic DOM. Dynamic DOM means that which can handle interactions with you. That means a button starts working, a text box starts working, that's working. This is actually dynamic. This is the basic flow actually. This is another architecture you need to understand. So that just a basic architecture I am showing here. Yeah. So this is the basic architecture. That means you saw the previous. Now this is dynamic DOM, and you know dynamic DOM is sent as response. This dynamic DOM is sent as what? Response. That is actually response. This is the basic. That means what happens in the browser when you request a React application. That means once the React application is successfully created and you request it in the browser, this is the process how it works. So first browser loads all the static DOM. After that, it loads the library, the basic library. After that, it loads all the dependent library. After that, it loads the virtual DOM. Virtual DOM is dynamic. It will start interacting. And can you tell me by using which method virtual DOM is created? Which method is used by React to create virtual DOM? Which method is used by React to virtual DOM? React uses a method called render. By using render method, it is going to render the virtual DOM, right? So even the function components also have render method, but you don't use render method in function. Where you use in index. In index root dot render. Root dot render is going to render. So virtual DOM is loaded. Go to the index page. It uses the method which one render. And on render method, it will render this DOM. That is the virtual DOM which is added into memory. That is done by using render method. So root root element. Into the root element, we render the virtual DOM. Right? That means everything is not virtual DOM. Whatever this render method renders, that is considered as what? Virtual DOM. So this is the basic flow. That means what is the method? So the method is, it uses a method called render method. By using render method, it is going to do that. Render method is used to render virtual DOM. That's what actually happens. So render method is used to render the virtual DOM. So this is second part. That means first part, how high level request will happen. Second, internally, how this request happen. Now I will save this also. So arc react to, okay. This I will upload. Yesterday I upload the previous one, right? This is the second architecture. So two basic things are clear. How the request is managed and how the DOM is loaded. Actually, software developers, what we call the mechanism is, in many situations, in the beginning, what it is, static DOM. This is converted. It is converted into dynamic DOM. Of converting the static DOM into dynamic DOM is called, this process called bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is the process of converting the static DOM into dynamic. Regularly used by everybody, but bootstrap is different. Bootstrapping is different. Bootstrapping is converting the static DOM into dynamic. Right? So before the library is ready, it is static DOM. After the library is ready, it is dynamic. Why it is called bootstrapping? Because you know the meaning of the word boot. Booting means you turn on the computer. When you turn on the computer, compute or minutes of time to get from the time turned on and to the time it is ready. This phase is called booting. Booting. We don't say computer is loading. That is not technical word. Computer don't load. Computer is booting. Right? Booting is the process of getting ready. From static to dynamic, this process is called as bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is a mechanism of converting the static. What is the problem with libraries? Everything it should manage by using events, and DOM events and everything have to control the flow, right? This is first thing. Now, next point is how the component starts. What are the phases of component? So initially, which page is loaded? Index. In that, now how the component will start? That depends on which component you are using, whether you are using a function component or you are using a class. Currently we are learning class component, and I told you that life cycle hooks are present in which component? Class. Life cycle hooks are present in class component. So how this will start? Actually, what is the basic process is, so we have a architecture for that. So that means the process, how it actually works, the component. Yeah, this is the basic architecture of how it is going to work. All this explanation I will upload into class detailedly, right? This diagram of explanation. So you should know that component, class component in React comprises of three phases actually. One is mount phase, another one is update phase, another one is unmount phase. The mount phase, update phase, and unmount. So if anybody asks what are the phases component, every class component. And mount means what? Mount means at the time of loading the component, what are the activities to perform? Update means at the time of changes, means any event is triggered. So what activities to perform, that is update. Unmount is after you finished using the component, you are changing from one component to another, then the previous component will unmount. That is what unmount is. So at the time of loading, at the time of changes, and at the time of unload, these are the three phases actually. So this is the official React cycle actually. This is the official React cycle. That means usually it comprises of three phases: mounting, updating, and unmount. This is official, means generally this is how the phases works. Now inside that detailedly what will happen, I will show you, right? Because whenever you search for React life cycle, it will give you this diagram. This is the basic life cycle of React. But what is missing in every location is developers need to clearly understand in every phase internally what will happen. Because here this is just outline. That means what is mount phase? So mount phase is, so first constructor. Why first constructor? Because first component should be created. After component is created, then the component will mount. Yesterday I showed you both difference. In constructor also you write the functionality, in mount also you write the functionality. First constructor, after that mount. Next updating phase means what? You are storing some data in state, value to the state. You are adding some click change. All amount means what? You finished using the component, you are moving from one component to another, then the previous component will be removed and next component will load. Currently we haven't done that. That we are going to do in the next level. how to switch from one component to another, navigate from one component to another, we will see by using the concept of routing. We will learn about that point. So every component have three phases. Class component have three phases. One is mount, and another. So internally how it happens, I will show you. Actually, this is the basic internal flow. So suppose now first client have requested the login component. We request this login component in index.js. We will mention that login component should start. Then first step, what happens? It implements React component base, and by using the constructor, the component is created. First step is creating the component. Whatever the component requested by client, that component is created. First step, it is created. After creating, which phase will come? First phase is mount phase. In mount phase, you can see two methods are there. What are those methods? It will ask, means not asking, it is verifying, is all the environment ready for mounting. That means before mounting means before loading, first it will verify, is the environment suitable for loading. So component will mount is going to verify, is the platform ready to mount. Once this component will mount is finished, that means platform is ready. Then what will happen? All the presentation is rendered. After all the presentation is rendered, means whatever output is there, it is displayed. Then another method will fire up. What is that method? Component did mount. This confirms that loading finished. So before loading, component will mount. After loading, component did mount. That means first it will verify, is the environment suitable for loading. After that, it will load. After loading, it will give a confirmation that it is finished. Now, in this phase, what happens? That is what detail we have seen here. That means in this phase, what happens? I will copy this in a presentation so that it is clear for you. I will keep that in a presentation. Okay. Okay, so here, let me show you this point. Yeah. Now in this, what happens is, first one is the mount. In the mount phase, there are two important methods you understood. Will mount, did mount. What is the role of will mount? Will mount will confirm whether the platform is ready for mounting all the content, right? And what is did mount? It is a confirmation after mounting the content. That means finished, everything rendered successfully, right? So will mount and did mount. Now, what are the activities performed in this phase, mounting phase? In this phase, all these will happen. In the mounting phase, what will happen? This generally not given anywhere on websites and all, because any website will tell you only three phases outline: mount phase, unmount phase, and update phase. But at little bit experience level, in interviews, they may ask like, can you tell what will happen in mount phase? What are the activities performed in mount phase? In mount phase, what will happen? So these are the activities that happen in mount phase. First, what will happen in mount phase? State, assign values to state. Remember, state is not created in mount phase. In which phase state is created? In which phase state is created? In class component. In which phase state is created? State is created in constructor. At the time of constructing, state is created. State is not created in mount phase. The values into state are assigned in mount phase. If anyone asks in which phase state is created for class component, the state is created for class component at the time of creating component, not on mount. At the time of creating, because you saw already that state is defined in constructor. Constructor means before mounting, at the time of creating, state is configured. So what will happen? The values are assigned into state. And after that, if you are trying to use any APIs through Axios, Fetch, Ajax, the connection with APIs will happen. It will connect with APIs. Already you saw in mount phase only, we written connections with API, accessing data from particular API. After that, reading data from API and binding the data to the UI. How it will bind the data to UI? By using a method called data binding. Data binding, style binding, class binding, all these will happen in which phase? Mount. And if there are any events like on change, on click, on blur, those events are subscribed. Events will not fire. Events are subscribed. Subscribed means what I told you. Event is a message sent by sender to its subscriber. Events are subscribed means the event handlers are attached to event methods. That means there is a method handle click. To that handle click method, the event handler is attached. That means the events are attached to their relative functions. The events are attached to their relative methods, because every event have a method. On click means on click is equal to handle click. Handle click is a method, and attaching events to the methods is called subscribing, and detach the events from methods is called unsubscribe. Right? So first thing, what will happen in mount phase? These are the things. So what are the activities happens in mount phase? First, values are assigned to state. API requests are managed. It will fetch data from API. After that, it will render the API data into the virtual DOM by using the techniques of data binding, class binding, and style binding. They will apply CSS and classes, and events are subscribed. But events are not triggered. Events are just subscribed. That means all your content is ready. Output is ready. Events are ready, but still events are not function. Right? This is the mount phase. I hope everyone clear. Right? So majority of resources will tell you about mount phase methods, but what happens in mount phase methods is important to understand, right? That is the first thing. Second, after mounting is finished, if any changes are happening, that means you clicked a button, you typed something in text box, then automatically update will fire up. Update. So what is the next phase after mount? The next phase is update phase. And when this update phase will happen, the next phase is update phase. After the mount phase, update. What will happen in the update phase? Actually, update phase is maintained by component did update. Actually, there is another one. Detailedly, I will show you another diagram. So actually, there is another one, component. So component should update. Should update. This will decide whether update to happen or not. After it decides whether to update happened or not, after update is finished, this will fire up. This will fire up. That means, for example, how it will verify whether update happened or not. How it will verify whether update happened or not, any change happened or not. Actually, to verify whether update happened or not, it uses a mechanism called change detection. It uses a mechanism called change detection. Actually, change detection uses a technique. It uses a formula. The formula is previous value is equal to current value. Previous value is equal to current value, and the previous value is not equal to current value. This is the formula it uses for updating. That means what happened in component, we have a text box. In the text box, previous value is some John and current value is David. That means previous value is not matching with current value. Means what? If previous value is not matching with current value, it means change detected. How an application knows that some change happened? By using a simple formula. The formula is previous value, current value. If previous value is equal to current value, then no change happened. If previous value is not equal to current value, that means some change happened. That means when the component identifies that previous value is not equal to current value, it will fire up a method called should update. It will fire up a method called component should update. That means it will tell the component that you need to update. Now what component will do? It will fire up events. What are the events? On change, on blur. It will fire up the events and it will collect the changes and update the changes. That means events will fire up, changes are identified, and the changes are updated. This all will happen in which phase? Update. And update is managed by two methods. What are those two methods? Component should update and component did update. So mount is managed by component will update, component will mount, and component did mount. Will mount means it is going to mount. Did mount is it is mounted. Should update means change detected. If some change detected, should update will fire up. Then after changes are updated, then it will send a confirmation. What is that confirmation? So component did update. This is the option. Did update indicates that update is finished. And what are the activities performed in this phase? The activities performed in this phase: event fire up, identifying the old value and previous value and current value, and binding the new changes into the UI. That means again render will happen here. Again render will happen. What is this render? Render the new value on screen. That means you made some changes. When you made the changes, old value will be replaced with new value. That new value should be rendered again. That means a render phase will come in two times. One is After mounting, render will happen. After updating, render will happen. After mounting, initial values are rendered. After updating, final values are rendered. Right? This happens in update phase. Right? That is the basic above architecture is explaining actually. This is the basic architecture here. This is the basic architecture. You see, after mount, render is there. And after updated, render is there. Actually, how it is updated? By using properties, it can get a new value. By using set state, it can get a new value. Later, you will learn about another method called force update. By using that, we can get the new value. That means how the new values are sent. How the updated values are sent. Updated values, new values are sent into any component by using three mediums. What are those? By using properties, you can send new value. By using set state, you can send new value. By using force update, you can send new value. That means in React, a component is updated by using values coming from three sources. One is properties, another one is set state, another one is force update. Those are the things it is going to do, right? So this is the concept of updating phase. After that, the final phase. After that, the final phase is this unmount phase. Now, generally, when the unmount phase will fire up. Usually, when the unmount phase will fire up, when you close the application. When you close application unmount, or you are changing from one component to another. That means you loaded one component, that component related memory is allocated. After allocating memory for the component, all activities are performed. After that, you requested another component. Then what should happen? It will delete all the memory allocated for current component and it will allocate new memory. This I explained. I told you stateless nature. Remember? When we discussed about use state, I told you about the concept of state. Why you need state? In web applications, why you need state? Why a web application needs a state? Because web applications use HTTP. HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP is a stateless protocol. Stateless protocol means it cannot remember information between requests. Once the request is finished, it goes to second request. Whatever memory allocated for first request is deleted. So every web application which runs on HTTP is stateless. Right? HTTP itself is a stateless protocol. We call HTTP as stateless protocol. This I explained already. When we discussed about the concept why you need state, I explained the point, right? That means HTTP is a stateless protocol because once you finished using one page, you went to another page, the memory allocated for previous page is deleted. And to make the application remember the information of one page and keep it available to another page, you need state. We can manage that using query string. We can manage that by using session, application, local storage, cookies. So many state management techniques are there. Some state management techniques I will explain. Some state management techniques we will see how they are going to work, right? So what happens now is you finished using one component and you are moving to another component. When you are moving to another component, then unmount phase will fire up. Now what will happen in unmount phase? In unmount phase, what will happen? The events are unsubscribed. Events are unsubscribed. When the events are subscribed, The events are subscribed in mount phase now. In mount phase, events are subscribed. Subscribing means what? Subscribing is nothing but you have a handle click method. This handle click method, we have button on click. So on click, we are using handle click. Here it is like this dot handle click like this, handle click like this. That means actually subscribing is nothing but connecting. Unsubscribing is disconnecting. That means once the events are unsubscribed, then events will not fire up. That means events are not going to work anymore. That is unsubscribed. That means it will unsubscribe the events, and whatever memory allocated for methods is cleaned up. That means whatever memory is allocated, it is deleted. After that, the state values are set to initial. That means before you set a state value, it was 0. After the changes, it became 2. And after component unmounts, again state value will become 0. That means whenever you open any component, the state value will reset. That means all the state values will set to initial values. And the memory allocated for component is cleaned up, delete. That is the reason the next coming component don't have any clue about the previous. That means in previous component, you collected some result, 10 plus 20, some 30. This 30 result you want to show in second component, it's not there. That means whatever memory allocated for the first component, it is deleted. The next component that comes in, it doesn't have the traces of previous. That is the reason software developers working with web technologies use state management techniques. Through the state management techniques, we can remember information and we can use. I hope in JavaScript you have seen local storage, session storage, cookies like concept. What you can do, you can store data of one page and you can carry the data to another page. You can access and use in another page. That you can do by using local storage and all, right? So usually that is possible with the local storage. Actually, so you can store the data. Suppose this is demo. Suppose in this demo, so we are having a simple, see, I'm just writing script here. What I will do is I will create local storage dot set item. We have like username, and username is some name. And usually what happens when you run this? When you run this, automatically a local storage is maintained. Right click, inspect, and you go to the category of application category will be there. There you can see local storage. In that local storage, you will find that username John is stored. What is the advantage of this is you can access from this local storage and use in any page. In any another page, you can access that value and store. Do you know the ability of local storage? Even you close the browser, that value is still present. It is permanent. Until you delete, it is present. So that is local storage. We have another one, session storage. Session storage is, it will be there until browser is open. Once you close the browser, it is gone. That means suppose you are doing some money transactions, and until the transaction is done, memory should be there. Transaction finished, it should delete. In that case, we use session storage. We want permanent. Tomorrow also, when I come, it should be available. Then we have to use local storage. That is different mechanism. Why you need this? Because generally web applications cannot handle data between requests. For that, we need state management techniques. So the point here is, how you can manage and use the data. So these are the three basic phases. I hope you are clear. That means what are the activities performed in every phase? What are the activities? What are the main phases? Three: mount, update, and unmount. So before mount, what is the phase? Before mount, what is the phase? Creating component. Creating component is the phase before mount. Right? After creating component, what is the next? After component is created, next what should happen? So the component will mount. And now I will explain the flow. Actually, this is the logical flow. This is the logical flow. First constructor. After that, it will verify and it will ask that component will mount. And after that, it will render. After rendering, component mount finish. Mount finish means what? Did mount. Component will mount. Component will mount decides that the platform is correct, means suitable environment is there, then it will render. After render, it will give a confirmation. What is the confirmation? Component did mount. After component mounted, application starts running. And very important is, if properties changed, then what will happen? It will collect the properties and it will identify that it should update. It will verify that it should update. Right? If state is changed, it will identify that it should update. There is one more I told you. Force update happened, it will verify that it should update. And if a should update is false, when should update will return false? When should update will return false? When should update will return false? If current value is equal to previous value. If current value is equal to previous value, there is no change. If there is no change, then should update will return false. If it return false, it will again continue running. When it will return true? It will return true when current value is not equal to previous value. If current value is not equal to previous value, that means there is some change. Then it should update. After updating, again render. After rendering, it is a confirmation that update finished. That means did update, should update, will update, did update. Should update means, do I need to update? Will update means, yes, you need to update. So update rendered and update finish. So this is the phase. After that, next phase running. And after the component is finished, at any time, what will happen? Unmount. Anytime it may unmount. When unmount happens, it will execute, component will unmount and it will stop. That is the basic flow. This presentation also I will upload into Classroom. Right? This is the basic flow. Right? So majority, whenever you learn about React from various sources, you will find only high level architecture everywhere. Means only high level architecture. Why experienced people know this architecture internally, what happens, which event happens, how we know about it? Because we have seen the concept of React before it was built. We are in this industry and we are dealing with web technologies, and we know and we have seen how these libraries built. That means we have seen so many versions of these from the beginning, from the birth of this. That is the reason we know the phases internally what will happen, which everybody may not know. People who are in the technology from more than 15-20 years and they have seen the birth of these technologies, they know, because earlier they used to design everything like this. Earlier, a developer have to design a library like this. We used to design a library like this. We need to create a library which will first load, which will identify the changes, update the changes. We used to build such libraries. Now the library is given like this. That is the reason it is popular. Why developers shows interest in learning React? Because earlier he was doing all this manually. And now a technology came which already gives everything ready. Just you need to implement it. That is why, right? That means people who are recently learning React and trying to train you on React, they don't know the birth of the libraries, are not aware of how these libraries are built, then they may not have all this idea. Right? People who know the technologies from their birth, that means because we have seen Angular JS before Angular came, right? We have seen all libraries before React JS came. Before React JS came. That means people who work with jQuery, JavaScript, they build single page applications. Single page applications we build by using JavaScript jQuery. And actually, in JavaScript jQuery, all activities are done by using Ajax. And Ajax have a life cycle. I hope if you know, Ajax have life cycle methods like Ajax start, Ajax end, Ajax error. Ajax have life cycle methods. Ajax is having life cycle methods. If you know Ajax life cycle methods, this is same concept actually. That means Ajax uses those life cycle methods. Like that means you made a Ajax request. That means Ajax started, Ajax completed, Ajax success. All these phases will be there. Ajax life cycle methods will they. Suppose you know Ajax life cycle here. This is not the page. We have jQuery here. Script, suppose script source is node modules. jQuery is there. Dist jQuery.js. Suppose if that jQuery is there, actually here we have the concept. So we have a dollar function. This is actually jQuery. And suppose here we are using is having method like Ajax complete.